Public Safety Issues and Tax Update. Mr. Sheriff.
All right, welcome everybody. We do this every year. We're again this year we're excited. I brought along some members of my staff because they're more subject matter experts on some of these. Typically, when we're sitting with the whole group, we get hit with a few more questions than I can answer, and so I brought my chief of staff who put most of this process together, can answer some of the questions on some of the comparisons over the years. The under sheriff Joe Roybal is here so that he can answer questions on some of the operation with the jail and what have you. And then I brought Jane Frome here who does all of the budget stuff. So we'll kick this thing off. So the first one,
Budget officer.
the first one is public safety tax. Talks about the responsibilities of the sheriff. You can see that the first part is custodian of the jail. It's the only jail in El Paso County serving all 7 municipalities. The fire warden and fire responses. We have just recently hired a new deputy fire warden. He unfortunately won't take effect until after the 4th of July. Very, very highly qualified guy. He's got just a lifetime of firefighting experience, and he'll take over. I think he starts on Monday the 14th, I think. And he comes to us from the state of Colorado's Division of Wildfire Preparedness. So he's really well versed. He's got a lot of really good connections, and he'll help us move forward.
I got to tell you, the guy that's acting over there now, that one at the Emergency Operations Center is great as well. He's really, really.
Dan Batten.
Dan is just really knowledgeable, and I really appreciate his hospitality and staying late and asking questions when we did that with Citizens College. So
yeah, he unfortunately he didn't want the job. He just didn't want that. He'd rather do the.
He wants to fight fires.
He'd rather be out fighting fire than he would be running the joint. And so I think he would have been a shoo-in if that's what we would have wanted. But you can see just by the numbers down below, in 2012, we responded to 70 wildland fires. We have had 126 last year, and our numbers are going to hit that number again in 22. The next piece is transporting prisoners and doing prisoner transports. 2012, it showed 24,733. I don't know why the 2,581 is on there. Is that a we think that number is significant. I think that number is significantly higher.
They count transports. I think they're counting it differently, as a transport can be from the courthouse to the jail. It can be to another jurisdiction. It can be extraditions.
Yeah, keeping the boundaries the same year to year. Yeah.
Execute writs. We did 641 in 2012, 446 in 2021. But you got to remember that part of executing writs includes restitutions. In 2021, we were still under a restitution moratorium, and we are sitting on a backlog of over 13,000 restitutions right now. We're not real sure how we're ever going to catch up. They're doing about 4 a week. They're dangerous, that's where we remove people from homes when they're not paying rent. That's why that number is so low, is because of the restitution moratorium. The next one is preserve the peace, calls for service. In 2012 was 40,163. You can see we're over 122,000 now. A lot of that, I'll let Janet explain that because she's the one that pulled that data.
So we have the asterisk down at the bottom that says it reflects all the calls for service within unincorporated El Paso County, to include the traffic complaints and officer-initiated activity, where those wouldn't have been counted in the prior years. That's part of the struggle of pulling this information together every year, is we have new ways of capturing data, and then as we get different legislative changes that require us to collect different data points, it starts to inflate what those numbers look like because we're having to count it.
So 2 questions on that note. The changes in terms of which way and what kind of data you collect. What would be a more representative year of 2020 than 2012.
Well,
The year prior.
yeah, the year prior,
Mhm.
we added a brand new software, last year, because of, part of the problem is always trying to gather the data, number one. Number two, like she said, we added all these other municipalities into our comm center. And when they were previously tracking like Manitou and Monument and Fountain, they were tracked by their comm centers, now they're all part of us. And so those calls for service now get thrown into the number. Last year, we added a new software called
First watch.
First Watch. First Watch will actually separate that all out. This year, it's too early for us to compare because we just added it
Right.
in 21.
Next year will look even
Right.
more different, because they collect data.
Sure.
It's a lot different.
Well, and then the other question is, you know, when you look at, particularly for that category, the population growth between 2012 and even since 2017 to now is you know,
Yeah,
vertical.
you see
and
that
so-
in Falcon.
Right, exactly.
In that unincorporated area, until Falcon decides that they're going to become incorporated as a town, that area belongs to us.
Yeah,
So
right.
we have a huge amount of calls.
Sure, it does, and so that's what I'm saying, so those are important discriminators in those numbers in terms of that large, to
Right.
justify that large
Right.
jump between the,
Well,
okay.
and, you know, part of that whole 2012 issue is that's when the public safety tax was initiated
Mhm.
and put on the ballot.
Right.
And that's why we continue to track
Okay,
that.
that's good,
But
yeah.
there's gonna be a point somewhere in the interim, you know, we're 12 or 10 years into it. I think this expires, does anybody know for sure, the PST expire in 28?
Yeah, it was renewed in 18, right?
Yeah, and I think it was
The 10-year tax.
Yeah.
So I think it's good until 28. So at some point, you know, in the next couple of years, it's gonna have to be renewed, and when it gets renewed, I would suggest that you pick a starting point to trigger further work on that than where it is, because I don't know, I've got Nikki's slides on what the impact on our budget has been, because it's significant.
Right.
So we'll talk about that later.
Yeah, and that, but going forward, I mean, you got plenty of time to think about it now, but I'm with RTA, so we think about those.
Right.
Those things now, 2 or 3 years out, and the changes in statute, the changes in policy,
Mhm.
population growth, all of those are significant drivers for why the numbers have changed, and otherwise, you know, and so, yeah, there's a lot of
Well, and
analysis behind those
it's
numbers.
hard, what makes it even more difficult is, when, the PST or 1A was first presented in 2012, that was one sheriff. And then, you know, 18 months later, I get elected, and so I come in and now what my priorities are and what my plans and objectives have been different. And
Sure.
have been drivers off of what has gone on. And then you're gonna have another shift next
Yep,
year.
yep.
And so those are gonna change again. So you never know how this is
Sure.
gonna play out going forward.
Yep.
The next piece is permits for concealed weapons. You can see we had 22,556 in 2012. Today, we've got 30,000 more. I will tell you today, we're pushing 53,000. The numbers go up unbelievably.
Yep.
Those also generate revenue. What happened in 2012 through 2014, that revenue went into a separate account. Well, they called that a restricted budget. And so it piled up in a restricted budget. Today, when I took office, I didn't like having all of those separate accounts that were not tracked. We dumped that revenue into the general fund, and it's pushed back to us from the county budget office. And so, you know, that represents a figure in county revenue as well.
Right.
Search and rescue missions, in 2012, we had 166. In 2021, we had 115. A lot of that was still because of lockdowns. It kept people in their homes. They didn't get out and about much, so we didn't have that. And that didn't change. Let me try it on here. Okay. Talk about response times. Again, these are a little difficult to track differently because, like I said, we've brought in all of these other agencies, right? So the response time in a smaller geographic area like Fountain, Manitou, Monument, Palmer Lake, Callahan, that are now part of our comm center, that are all part of our numbers, the response times in those smaller geographic areas tend to be very quick, like they are most of the time in our security Whitefield Strathmore Valley area. But when you plug in areas like Falcon or eastern El Paso County, they tend to stretch it back out. And so while we have similar numbers or assigned personnel today, the problem is we have those numbers skew at a quicker time, and some of our larger jurisdiction or larger geographic areas tend to spread it back out. So our response times in 2012 were about 11 minutes and 3 seconds on priority 1 calls. Today they're about 11 minutes. Routinely, that's about the average. We tend to watch those closer for geographic areas by district than we do otherwise. Then we can report on this. It takes us all day long to do that.
Mm-hmm.
Priority 2 stuff, we're responding much faster in priority 2 stuff. Part of that is because we have, based on first watch, we no longer track priority 3. We dumped a lot of that into priority 2, and it creates a faster response time where you can see priority 3 calls in 2012 were 52 minutes.
What's
Priority
an
3 calls
example of a priority 3 call?
A cold,
Yeah.
like a
Cold theft.
cold theft.
Oh, okay.
Cold theft.
Came home, my
yeah.
house is
Right.
broken in, there's nobody around.
Yeah, not even, that's a burglary. That would probably generate a priority 2 response. They would be the very low level stuff, traffic complaints and things like that.
Okay.
So we've dumped those back into priority 2. We now have them broken out in different areas under first watch. So I would suggest that next year you put a waypoint in there, you know, previous to first
Right,
watch,
right.
post first watch, after you get a full year's worth of data, and then you'll see what that new first watch system is doing. We just didn't have enough. We don't have enough data to do
Sure.
that. It would have looked ridiculous.
Yeah, this next year will show one full entire year
Right.
of the first watch data.
But I would imagine that your concentration of officers per square mile or area in an area like Falcon or other incorporated areas is much different than it is in out in the sticks.
Right. Well, and so you're exactly right. So what happens is we base our deployment models off of need, off of call for service need, not off of a comparison between the number of people and the number of officers.
Yeah,
So if you look at
historical
national trends, they'll say-
number of calls and that kind of thing.
Yeah, they'll say, you know, you need 1 cop per 2,000 people. Well, that's a cool model and it's a quick thing. It isn't fair, because our models for staffing our patrol districts 5, 6, and 7, which is Security, Whitefield, and Strathmore Valley, are much higher than they are for Falcon.
Right.
The Falcon jurisdiction is much, much larger, but the calls for service load is much, much lower. We'll put 1 or 2 cars, you know, in Falcon and eastern El Paso County, where we'll have 2 cars in each one of those districts down south, because the call load is much higher.
Right.
The rest of it talks about the number of deputies authorized, the number of deputies assigned in patrol, comparing 2012 and 2021. You know, we authorized 59 in 2012. In 2021, we have 139 authorized. We've got 121 assigned, and part of that is because we've got, and that includes basically all of our law enforcement bureau. So they could be assigned to investigations, they could be assigned to an undercover operations, they could be assigned to just about anything that deals with our law enforcement bureau. But our primary concern at the sheriff's office is not just calls for service and law enforcement operations. Our primary responsibility, if you go back to the previous slide, is the jail, right? And when you've got those inmates down there, you can't just constantly feed law enforcement. And that's always our concern, is the balance towards safety in a confined facility versus response times on patrol.
Right.
On patrol, if you need help, we can draw help from a multitude of agencies and they can respond with us. If those people in the jail call for help, they better be in the building.
Right.
Right? So
Right, yeah.
that's one of the concerns that we have.
And to go back, this is 1A deputies,
Right.
not general fund deputies.
Does that make sense? They're about a third of our staff
Is paid by
is paid by
tax.
the public safety tax.
Okay, so that's not your total number?
No.
Mm-mm.
We have
Okay.
542 sworn deputy sheriff allocations.
Okay,
This number is just public safety tax.
okay, all right, that's a good clarification.
And that might have answered my question, but I know just a few minutes ago you were talking about the priorities and the fact that with priority 3, you found it more beneficial to push that into priority 2. So I was curious, there used to be 8,291 in priority 3, that category doesn't really exist anymore, but you also only have an addition of 4,000, 2,500 more calls for service now than you did there. So what's the difference between?
COVID.
Well, COVID, number
Okay.
1, and number 2, we don't have a full year of data. We don't have a full year data
Got
set.
it.
Of the-
Got it.
Of that first watch.
You
Got
get that
it.
first watch, a full year of
Okay.
data set in there, you're gonna see the numbers are way up.
Right. Okay, thank you.
If you
That
look
explains
at
it.
you look at the calls for service over here, we're up 82,000 calls for
Right,
service.
right. So then I was looking at the priority calls and I was like, that math doesn't add up.
Right,
Right.
and that's why, because that first watch time for the full year is not.
And it's tricky. We could have thrown more numbers in here, but we didn't want to confuse.
No,
it's good.
You
One is
know,
good.
separating out between the jurisdictions as to,
Mhm.
calls for service where we're dispatching for Fountain or we're dispatching for Manitou Springs or any of the others. You can separate those out. So it's a lot of numbers.
I think it'd be, when we do this again later on, I think it would be interesting to pull out a couple of different districts to just to kind of compare what
Sure.
the requirements are in this district versus that district.
Sure.
Et cetera.
For instance, the requirements change in the Falcon area and how that's grown from 2012. And I mean, I got in my mind how that's done when I drive out there. But, so overall within your deputy force, are you having troubles with recruiting and retention? Are you still having problems with that? I know CSPD is having issues.
Yep.
You got the same problems?
Every agency is, and one of the things that I brought with me, and once we finish going through this presentation, I've got another one that I do an in-service presentation.
Okay.
And I talk about some of the things that we're doing to change our retention and our hiring procedures, and some of the things we've done with salaries and benefits and equipment and stuff like that we're doing to try and keep those numbers up. And it's difficult because we're competing across the across the spectrum with public safety, and because of the national commentary on law enforcement, it has driven people away in droves.
Right.
So we're doing some things, and I'll show you some of that.
Okay.
In this other slideshow.
Okay, great.
Sheriff, if I may add to that, I don't necessarily agree 100% that we still have a problem. We have confirmed we have 38 in the next academy near the end of this month. In May, we graduated 34.
Out of a starting class of?
Well, we graduated 33 out of 34.
Okay, that's good.
And that was the largest academy since 2017. Now we're up to 38. So I think we've turned the
Starting
corner
to turn the
with the incentives that we've put in place.
That's awesome, because I know the city has had a 40 or 50% washout rate from the starting of some of their academies to graduations, and it's really impacting where they, on their trajectory of trying to meet that goal of providing.
Well, so one of the things that we did is we used to hire people and put them directly into a post academy, right? A Peace Officer Standards and Training Academy. And what that does is it teaches them how to be a street cop. But they weren't going to go on the street.
They were
We're going to go in the
jail.
jail.
Right.
And what we found was they're like, I want to work in patrol, and I go in and I spend 22 weeks. I mean, think of that, 22 weeks in an academy. After going through a 3-month selection process, they're done. We got 9 months invested in them. We got $60,000 worth worth of county time and money in them. And what happened is we give them this golden ticket. Here's your post certificate, and now you're going to go work in the jail. And 6-8 months later, they're like, I'm taking my golden ticket that you just gave me. And oh, by the way, El Paso County does such a great job at vetting staff that they can go to work anywhere, and they don't have to be retrained. Very few places, CSPD is an exclusion, require them to go back through another academy. CSPD does. So we didn't lose a ton to CSPD, but almost every agency around just would take them. And what we did is we figured out, why not train them for the job they're going to do?
Right.
If they're going to go to patrol, we'll set up a post academy and we'll train them.
There you go.
So in 2018, we switched. And what happened is we now have fewer people apply, because not everybody wants to work in the jail. We have fewer people apply, so we are running constant academies. We're running 3 this year. We just graduated one. We have one that starts 2 weeks from today. And we have another one that'll start in September and graduate at the end of the year. We also ran a post academy this year of
Next Monday.
1 week. Yeah, I was
One
gonna say
week.
I'm on vacation.
Oh,
so it's
next
1
Monday.
week.
Yeah, but they know where they're going. They're
Right,
not disappointed that I'm not going to patrol.
Right, and then in addition, what we've done is we've taken, instead of 22 weeks, we now train them for 11 weeks. And those 11 weeks are intensive jail-based training. So they're better prepared for where they're going.
In the environment they're going to work
in the environment they're going to work in,
Oh,
and
yeah.
they understand. So they're not going to walk out and go, hey, this is not what I expected.
Yeah, exactly.
And so what that turnaround over the years had caused a little bit of a slump. And then you couple that with 2020. And this is something that most people just don't pay a lot of attention to. In April of 2020, Nikki Simmons came to us and said, hey, COVID's going to lock everything down. We are anticipating that your budget could be $3.5 million smaller at the end of the year, meaning you're going to need to have $3.5 million left over this year, and next year your budget's going to be $3.5 million smaller going in. And so with our budget being 82% of the overall, or 82% of our budget is personnel, there's only one way to get there.
Right.
Only one way. And rather than walking in and laying off a bunch of people in April and May, we sat back in it, we scheduled out what our normal attrition rate would be. And where do we have to be in order to save $3.5 million? Well, we were 542 deputies. $3.5 million is roughly 30 deputies, right? At 100 grand a pop. So we know we got to lower our number by 30. We lose 6 a month. We need to lower by 5 months. So we said May, June, July, August, September, October, we're going to lower it. We should be at 510 by the end of the year. If we're at 510, we've saved enough money over the year, plus what we have in our PST fund balance. And by the end of 20, we should be in a position where we can withstand a $3.5 million cut. Fair? There's a way to do it. So we started trimming people through attrition. At the same time, we're training them for the jail. We're just not hiring as many people through 20. We couldn't hold academies because of COVID and what have you, so our numbers started to dwindle. We get through the end of the year, and what really happened is sales taxes were up significantly.
Yeah.
And we said, well, if this holds, if we really don't have to be short, we need to open the faucet in 21. Mm-hmm. And we did. So the first opportunity we had in 21 to make a hiring, we did. And I think we had 17 people in those 2 academies that we had.
Smaller.
So we only hired 34 people all of 21.
And
Here.
keep in mind, George Floyd also happens in 20.
Right. Right.
Right. So our numbers were down for a reason in 20. And then in 21, we cranked the faucet wide open under this new training model, under all of the other external pressures we're going through to try and get ramped back up to get our numbers back up to 542. We now, like Joe said, we're right now at about 500 sworn personnel. We're plus or minus a couple. We'll have another academy in September where we should be close to 40, and we're going to be very close to our number. The other thing we're seeing is our attrition numbers, because of some of the things I'll talk about in a little bit, our attrition numbers are slowing. And we think that's due to a lot of these changes that we've put in place. Does that help?
Yeah, it does, and it makes sense in that with the attrition number going down, because you've lowered expectation of people coming to the academy. This is what you're going to do. And is there a period of time before they transition to patrol?
Oh, yeah.
I mean, it's like 2 years or whatever.
It's
something
typically 2 to 3 years.
Right. Okay.
And so they get a chance, and then as they're doing that, we'll set them up and set them through a post academy. So now, closer to the time that they transition, now they go through this new academy that's still 22 weeks to train them on what they're going to do. And now that we don't have to focus on the jail training, we can hyper focus on skills that will make them better cops.
But now they've got that background of what happens when I arrest somebody, and it goes in, and they know the procedures and the processes and are well versed in them. So they're
and they actually become better communicators having worked in the jail.
I would agree.
But the concern, what raises our concern is, we've got today we've got about an $85 million budget, and about 30 million of that is PST. Well, when you're running 82% of your budget is personnel,
right?
And so 82% of that 30 million is personnel, and that's public safety tax. When the budget office tells you to be expecting a cut in sales tax, you better be awake.
Yep.
Because when we talk all the time, if your revenue source is based on property values and property taxes, it can take years to change the trajectory of the revenue.
Right.
When sales tax drives your revenue source, it takes a whim. It takes a change in economic conditions, and suddenly your boat is sinking quickly, and you better be prepared to move. That's why we were moving on 35 employees in a 7-month period. I didn't want to end the year and have way too many employees. So we took the risk.
Yeah.
Sorry. This talks about the number of personnel. 367 was the average in 2012. 422 is the average in 2021. And that again, that's 1A numbers that were hired in 1A or under 1A from 12. A number of inmates is the same. However, you look at that scale down below. You see that in 2012 the number was just shy of 1,400. Then it dipped a little bit. When I took office, it was just above 1,400. In 2018, that scale shows a number just above 1,600. But there were a number of months in the summer of 18 when we were at 1,830 inmates. That is a scary figure in a confinement facility. That our maximum number is 1,834. We were packed to the gills, and what we did is we pulled together all of staff in 2019 and said, I don't care if a change reflects 5, 10, 20 inmates. We've got to look at everything across the board to lower that number, lower it in a number that holds, and do it safely so we're not releasing people to the community that are a danger to our community. And so we implemented a number of changes. 2020's number is really low because of COVID. It restricted it. 2021 is back now. We're slightly above 1,200. I can tell you, I look at that by 6 o'clock every morning. I get a ward report, tells me how many are in the jail, and we had a big backlog from DOC. We still hold a backlog of about 75 to 80 or so DOC inmates, but we're running almost every day in the 1,200 to 1,250 range. It's important because that ties up personnel, right? And the more inmates you got, the more dangerous the facility is.
You don't need to go into this now, but do you guys track what the recidivism rate is in terms of guys that are coming back and all you've got?
About 73%.
Okay.
Yeah, a lot higher than you'd think it is. We've got some plans. Joe's got some plans. He's got a big history in the jail. He's got some plans on how to do some things moving forward that will help continue to push those recidivism rates down. And I mean, he can share that.
That's fine, yeah.
These are the number of bookings and the number of releases. The numbers are fluctuating lower because we just simply have that many fewer people in 2013, these run year by year. If
You've
you
probably
were-
seen these
yeah,
5
if
years in
you
a row.
That was what we did with our public safety tax was 17.8 million in 13. It's 23.2 million in 14. 20.2 million in 15. We saw a little bit of a dip. 20.8 million. Let me go back and tell you this. $23 million in 2014. The day I took office, we were 42 sworn people overhired. Keep in mind, each one of those belly buttons is $100 grand. That meant that for 2015, I was anticipating being $4.2 million higher. There's your 2014 tax PST. There's your 2015 PST. It is $3 million less, and we had 42 additional people. So in 2015, we couldn't hire at all. We were waiting to attrit. We didn't attrit those numbers until end of October of 2015 is when we got to where we knew we could now make it through the end of the year. 2016, the number held $20 million, $20.7 million. That number held. So we were still operating on how to get to that balancing point.
And you can't mix PST and general fund, right?
We have them in two different funds. Employees don't know if they're a PST employee or a general fund employee. It doesn't really matter. But the two funds do not intermingle.
Okay.
In addition to that, we have capital and operational concerns that we still have to add, right? We still have to get things going, even though the money is lower and the number of personnel is higher. 2017, we're back up to $22.6 million, $22.7 million. 2018, we're starting to see an increase. We're starting to see things doing pretty well. We're at $25 million. 2019, it's very close, right? We're only up about $800,000, but we're holding things and we're still adding to different pieces of our operation. 2020, we go up to $26.9 million. That's the year when we're told, be prepared that you could lose $3 million, $3.5 million from your budget. That's where we threw out an anchor and said, this is what we're gonna do. In addition, you'll see some of the changes that we did when I do the other piece. 21, big increase, $31.8 million in 21.
Yeah, so 21 was where they kicked in the online sales tax and we started receiving
Correct.
that money. Which came across the board for anybody with that kind of.
It started in November of 2020.
Right.
We knew that was the other thing in 2020 as we were doing those budget items. We knew in 2020 that November could show a significant drop as well because those numbers were already being reported. November came around and it didn't drop. It just continued to increase. So today, again, we've got the faucet wide open. We're doing some other things. We've used our fund balance to handle a lot of one-time things. New radios, new firearms, new rifles, new shotguns, ballistic vests and stuff.
Do you mind backing up 2 slides real quick? What, you went from 19 to 42 professional personnel.
It just means that
We might have shifted them on the budget, taken them out of general fund and are tracking them
Under the PST.
under the PST.
so for example, as the budget increases that we have to spend on food or medical or any of the ongoing capital, those costs, every time that happens, we have to move personnel over into the PST.
Here's why. I remember this now. In this budget, where there's 164 and 29 in 2019, we had our jail medical contract tracking under PST. We switched it because we've now pushed it back into the general fund, and the general fund started to kick people out in 19 and now in 21. Those personnel are now funded under the PST instead of the general fund, because our general fund is now covering a $12 million medical services contract, and our food services gotta be pushing $3 million.
Well, yeah, it's more like 9 and 3, it's
9 and
still
3 is
12
million.
12 million, just for those
So-
two contracts.
So, yeah, where in 2012, those numbers were, I don't know, half that, $6 or $7 million. The numbers have just gone through the roof.
Well, it was after you had all that problem and renegotiating the metal
Right.
contract and
Right.
all that stuff, yeah.
Yeah, renegotiating the medical
Right.
contract, and we've got new
Yeah, I remember
vendors,
that.
we're still fighting them, and, yeah. So this is some of the things, we had a lot of these on there last year, continue the personnel, appropriate staffing levels. Talk about the jail and detention services, the things that we're adding there. We're doing a lot of things for inmate safety, still using those PST fund balances. We're putting in Lexan walls on the upper level of all of the second tier throughout the jail so that people can't jump off anymore. We have put in new windows in some of the doors so that they get a better view inside the cell. The smaller windows were able to be blocked. Now we're putting in bigger windows, so we get a better chance. We're changing out the traps, the meal traps, so that we have access. They were just getting old, and so we're using the money to do that. Our special response teams now have body armor and new tactical gear inside the jail. If they need to respond to a problem, we want them properly trained and properly outfitted, and so we do that. We have some shortages that in personnel, and so we're making some adjustments to those. Our IT system has gone completely through the facility, through the jail, and basically through our office, and we are as modernized as we could be. Go ahead.
No, I was just going to ask that question. It's always, nothing replaces eyes on target.
Right.
But having the IT with the additional cameras now, the cheaper, more efficient,
Yep.
wider angle, clear, those things now, one person can watch a whole lot of areas on a monitor that you wouldn't otherwise be able to do with
Yeah,
older
all of the
technology.
cameras in the jail, and we've added cameras in our office down here. They're all now digital versus all of those analog.
Right.
We replaced all of the wiring, all of the monitors, all of the stuff that can do that, and so now they all have pan, tilt, and zoom. They're all color digital cameras, and so we have spent a significant amount of money on infrastructure. All of our computers, we are as well connected now as we've ever been. I tell people all the time, in 2015, the #1 complaint of staff was IT. Today, no one complains about staff.
When you're still running Windows 98 like the county commission was several years ago.
I don't even know what it is.
It wasn't that long ago they got rid of Windows 98, so we so far back.
Yeah, this is Commissioner Stan. We are well past Windows 98. I think we're on Microsoft 360, and we also have a cyber counter team, and there's an enormous amount of work being done to protect all parts of the county with regard to cyber attacks, because public agencies get attacked all the time now, and we have privacy personnel information that we have to protect. So yeah, we're way past Windows 98, but thanks.
Jane, I'm curious. Something that I think would be helpful and beneficial to me would be, what does the overarching budget look like, regardless of what bucket? Like, this is what it looks like. This is what it's being deployed to, blah, blah, blah. And then have, where PST applies, you could have like a sub-bullet that's like, this much is represented in PST. That, I'm a meta guy, so big picture is super helpful. If you throw me a bunch of random information and I don't have any construct to fit it into, I'm like, I don't know what to do with that information. But if I see a big picture and, oh, okay, this piece fits here, this piece, suddenly all that stuff makes sense. But I also recognize that that's on you. Like, you're the one that would be doing that work. Would that be particularly frustrating or challenging?
That would be easy, because that's something I already do.
Okay.
When we do
She does that
those.
for us at our staff meetings.
So the next time we do this, I would love to see that.
Okay.
Like, hey,
Yeah, I
here's
would
the
support
overarching budget. And, by the way, this much applies here, PST applies here, here, in these amounts.
What,
But then it helps me see the big picture.
Okay, sure.
but it
Thank you
helps,
very much.
I think it helps us help you in a way, that we can see the breakdown of how PST is helping the bigger picture.
Sure.
In terms of why it's beneficial and what benefits it's adding, especially when you're going into a reapproval process going forward. We know what percentage it is, and we can say, and we can see benefits in terms of what percentage and how it's
Yep.
helping.
And to
over
see where, when we have PST surplus, how we put that in, and how the numbers of projects that we spend out of that PST surplus fund to get those one-time things accomplished, right? When we need new firearms and we spend $1.5 million to buy 600 new handguns, when we do that, and it kind of resets the clock on those perishable items, right? And you'll see how that happens and why it's done that and how it's been so beneficial to the agency. We're as updated as we can get with most of this stuff. So I agree. I think that's probably.
I would bet in 6 years from now, it's gonna be close to 50% of the
Yeah.
entire sheriff's office budget.
Yep.
Well, and
At the rate it's going now.
And the non-tax public needs to know that. We need to have answers to those questions of why and what it's doing and the benefits it's providing. And alternatively, what it would be like if we didn't have it.
Well,
What are your expectations if you don't have this?
Exactly. Well, and the other thing that it does, and Stan will tell you, the commissioners don't hear us stand in front of them and say, we have these critical needs. And we come to you and say, guess what? We need new guns, we need new shotguns, we need new this, we need new that, because we don't do that. And what that does is it frees the load on all the other department heads and all the other elected officials to say, if you've got $1.5 million left over in your overall budget, through the entire overall county budget, you don't have the sheriff's office coming in there saying, I need 5 million of your overall million. Because we handle it on our own. We put stuff aside and we say, we've got leftover this year, put it in the bank. Next year, we're gonna buy these things with that money. And you'll see that coming up when we start to talk about the Falcon, the impact of a growing Falcon and what we're doing for that.
Earlier, you referenced the concealed carry and how years ago that was put in a restricted budget category. And I'm assuming by that meant that there are only so many certain things that you could spend that money on.
Right.
Hence restricted budget. You've since moved it out into the general fund. At this point in time, what percentage of your overall budget is restricted in any way, shape, or form?
I don't think
There's
no
only
more.
one.
Yeah.
County security.
Oh, yeah.
Which is?
County security.
And
Okay.
it wasn't part of the discussion until 2019.
What is county security?
Like this building, county security used to be operated by the county.
Yeah.
And a couple years ago,
I think it was 19.
the county approached the sheriff to being responsible for the security of the buildings.
Got it.
It's kind of what we do. So the sheriff agreed. They moved that budget over to the sheriff's office budget, but we
Got
could
it.
only spend it on county security.
So it's restricted for that.
We didn't
Got it.
absorb it
So
into the sheriff's budget.
not an unfunded mandate, they moved the budget out of the county budget into yours
Right.
to cover it.
Right. And the reason they did that as a restricted budget was because, let's say a new sheriff comes along and says, I don't want to do the county security piece
Yeah.
anymore. They wanted to have that budget to say, okay, we're taking it back.
Right.
We're not gonna make it part of your budget, so we have to fight to extract it again.
Right.
Yeah.
And so it's like that, but that's all we spend it on is.
In 14, how many restricted budgets were there, Jamie? Was there like 5 or 6?
No, I think there was 9.
Yeah.
There used to be, quite a bit.
That was a
And
lot.
now any of our restricted budgets are the grants.
Got it.
And the problem was.
Well, that
those-
makes sense for the grant.
Yeah, the grant makes sense.
Yeah.
It's for a
So we have
specific
those.
purpose, so yeah.
Correct.
Those restricted budgets, I mean, it was like, well, where did that money go? Well, we bought a couple of cars with it. For what? Well, because we did. And we had our own in-house HR, we had our own in-house purchasing department. And it was like, this just, there's nobody watching how things were shifting.
Right.
Now, everything gets shifted to county general fund. County general fund monitors everything, county purchasing takes care of our purchasing, county HR does all of our hiring and firing stuff. Everything is done through the county, so there's a watchdog on every nickel that's brought in.
Take those silos away and put it out there in the public, so
Exactly.
that's good, yeah.
Exactly.
So Joe, but given the restricted budget then for the county security, do you feel like that has been sufficient in terms of funding levels for the task at hand that you were tasked with?
For now, yes. And I say for now, with COVID shutting down the courts, that really like recalibrated everything.
Yeah.
If it would have kept going, then no, it would not have
Okay.
been enough. Currently we're able to supply the vehicles, the equipment, uniforms, weapons, stuff like that. As it opens up post-COVID, we'll see. Our intention early on was to have, instead of security personnel, deputy sheriffs at all those posts. And that budget would not have sustained that. But there was a plan in place pre-COVID for the commission to increase the budget to allow us to put gray shirts, if you will, deputy sheriffs in all those posts. Will we get there eventually? It's hard to say because that hiring recruiting issue we had prevented us from doing that. We didn't have enough deputy sheriffs to staff the posts we had, let alone put those extras in the county security.
Right.
As we get back to there, we will revisit that.
Would that be one of those critical needs that you
There you
would
go,
go
Stan.
back to the commission for, if that budget doesn't, because it's not in your patrol budget, so this is one of those things that's kind of handed to you differently. Would that be one of those ones that you would go back for?
Well, like Joe said, that they originally set in placeholders for increases at certain levels.
Okay,
And
got it.
the 22 budget was one of those. There was a $400,000 increase slated for
Got
that,
it.
but we can't hire them fast enough even for county security.
Sure.
And we knew there was no way we were going to need that. We had surplus last year that we turned back to the county. That's one of those budgets, like our general fund budget. If we don't spend it, it goes back to the county
Right.
general fund. Our PST doesn't. It rolls to a savings account, and then we spend that on critical needs. That general fund budget for county security, we couldn't spend it all last year. We told them during budget time, we told Nikki, use that somewhere else because we know we're not going to need it. So they just dropped it from those critical needs. It'll roll back this next year, and we'll have to reevaluate.
Sure.
Is there a possibility that whoever the sheriff is that's going to be setting the budget is going to be able to spend it or not? So we'll kind of crank through some of this. These are some of the programs. Marijuana enforcement, we still participate in our deadly force investigations team. We still have school resource officers at every high school around the county. We are working with Monument, is working to try and stretch their legs into the SRO arena. We may see some changes in that, but we're still heavily involved with SROs. We have worked greatly to expand and modernize our evidence facility. We're now adding some moving shelving units to help us allow it to collapse the space needed, right? So we can push these shelves together, which will help. We've added a ton of cameras, some security systems. We added some new refrigeration equipment down there. That will continue to go. We've added a second range at the Cheyenne Mountain Shooting Complex because of increased numbers of personnel. We need to be able to shoot more often, and so we are now in the process of developing a second range. We did all of the firearms. We replaced them all with a Glock 45 with a streamlined and red dot technology. Those, we bought about 600 new guns at about $1,000, about $1,200 a piece. $650,000 just to replace our guns. The old guns were older version Glock 40 calibers that were ending the end of their useful life. The last thing we want is one coming apart. So we went with newer technology. If you shoot, this has got an RMR red dot sight on it, extremely accurate. Our shooting scores and our shooting numbers have gone way up.
What caliber?
9mm. FBI tests on some of the new ammunition. That 9mm performs as well as those Glock 40s did. And we get 17 rounds instead of 15 in the same amount of space. We now have we've added community involvement to our Bureau of Professional Responsibility. We've grown that quite a bit, including our Women's Liaison Program. We implemented a community conversations piece that gets us engaged more with the community to gather resources that the community's after. And we're seeking to create a multicultural community advisory board to help us deal with some of the issues that the community's concerned about. We've continued to expand our body-worn camera program. Everybody that works in the Law Enforcement Bureau has a fully operational body-worn camera. We are moving that through our reserve deputies, and we're running a pilot program in the jail to run them as well. We are in the final stages of replacing all of our radios. Those radios were built by Tate Technologies. Previously, they're a company out of New Zealand. We found that as the radio network central operations upgraded, those radios didn't cooperate very well. For instance, two people could be side by side talking on a radio. I could say something and she couldn't hear it. And we couldn't figure out why. Tate Technologies couldn't figure out why. It had something to do with the way that we were simulcasting off of repeaters. So we've had to go out and buy all new Motorola radios, 175 handhelds, 3 new repeaters. We've spent $1 million on that, and now we're in the process of remaking all of the jail stuff so that the jail has got the same thing.
Sheriff, but we were responsible with the equipment. We didn't just discard it and waste money. Those radios, the Tate radios, worked within the jail because of the way the repeater system was in the jail. So we moved all of those radios, was extended some of the life, parts replacing.
Right.
Now we're getting at the end of the life that we can use them safely in the jail. But we did use them.
We also cache them now. We're at a point, we keep a big group of them available. Should we have a major catastrophe, major fire, we can hand them out. It'll give us some communication. We outfit volunteer fire departments with them because they're there. We might as well use them.
Sure.
We've had to, in 22, we've had to upgrade all of our mobile computers again with new hardware and what have you. So all of our mobile radios or our mobile computers, they just reached their last useful life, which 2016 we bought all these new portable computers of MDCs, mobile data computers. They all had to be replaced, and so we're going back through that. And again, that's a lot of that money that we have put aside and that we're not asking the commissioners for. That is the end of that one. Let me jump to stop presenting, and I'm going to grab this other one, if I can figure this out. Share, and I'll run through this one.
You're using all the right words, Sheriff. You're pretty good over there.
Me?
Yeah, you got share and you got all this.
Come on, where'd it go?
I see an IT consultant coming on here.
He's pretty proud of his IT knowledge and.
So you got
For an old guy, right?
Yeah.
You got to be these days, I'll tell you.
Okay, so I do a briefing in service to all of our sworn personnel, and I'll cruise through this kind of quick if you've got questions, because it shares a lot of data. One of the things that we do is a couple of times a year we do a leadership workshop. Take them off site, we talk, everybody from lieutenants on up. We've recently included some of the sergeants. And we asked a question at this year's group. I said, I want to know the 3 things of this group that's about 80 people. What are the 3 things we do right? What are the 3 things we need to do better? And one of them was communication. And so I've tasked them to come through different processes to do that. But part of communication included me going back and showing staff, what do we really do that's communication-wise? is. And it's always there, you're just probably not paying attention to it. So this is what we developed, is this sheriff's briefing, where I go to their briefings every single briefing, and they were Tuesdays and Thursdays, and I'd go spend a couple hours at these in-service trainings. So one of the things I covered in the very beginning was, what were some of my goals when I took the office? I wanted to do an outside assessment of the agency. I wanted to know what worked and what didn't work, and I didn't want it to be some inbred report. So we hired a company, KRW and Associates, to come in and tell us. I wanted to engage in strategic planning and development. I'm a goal setter. I operate better when I have targets in how do I accomplish what it is I'm trying to accomplish. I wanted to work to get salaries as comparable to CSPD as possible. I wanted to eliminate us being the training center for our local police department. I wanted to upgrade necessary equipment and policies. I wanted to combine essential services regionally as much as possible. I wanted to put together a regional OEM, that got blown up, we're now in process. I wanted to put together regional training, we're still working towards some of that. And I wanted to put together a regional communication center. That can still happen, but you gotta figure, I've got everybody working at the sheriff's office now. We dispatch for every single police and fire agency in the county except CSPD and CSFD. And the only way that we're gonna get there is if we have some kind of serious change of heart.
When you say we, who do you mean?
We, meaning,
Community.
meaning all of us, the community, right? I
But
think,
like the citizen or the people within these different agencies?
I think the governing bodies have got to sit down and say, this is now a priority.
Got it.
And it's a priority because it'll provide a better service to our community, not something that's better for me as a head of an agency, right? We did a study a number of years ago, spent almost $100,000 doing this study, and they said, you absolutely can do better. It won't be cheaper, but you can do better. And frankly, when someone picks up the phone and dials 911, they don't give a crap whose agency it goes to. What they care is they get a fire response, a police response, medical response, or otherwise. They don't care if a blue shirt or a gray shirt shows up.
Don't they still have that regional call center, or is that
We have
count?
no regional call center.
So that went away?
911, we've never had one.
I thought we had a kind of tri-county or multiple county, El Paso, Teller.
No.
or-
Well, he's talking about El Paso County.
El Paso Teller
Teller 911
Right.
authority.
Right, so that is the authority that brings in the revenue. It's where you pay your tax money to, but they fund what's called a PSAP, a Public Safety Answering Point. Right now in El Paso County, there's two, ours and CSPD.
Okay.
And when you dial 911, it sends you to that PSAP based on your proximity. Based on where you sit on those towers, it'll send you to either us or CSPD.
So if I'm a city person in the county and I call on
It'll go
my
to the
phone, it'll go to the county,
Yep.
you do the deconfliction and send it.
Exactly.
Got it.
If
Okay.
you need, and if it comes to us and you're actually in the city and it just routed wrong, we can ship you to the city
Right.
seamlessly.
Right, got it. Okay.
So anyway, that was the combined essential services. Create a rural enforcement and outreach unit and assign a permanent Falcon car. Engage in statewide legislation and have a voice at the County Sheriffs of Colorado. And lastly, to develop leadership training and career development, right? If I get hit by a bus, I wanna know somebody can step in and sit in my seat. These are some of the questions that I asked them. Did you know how big the sheriff's office is in comparison to other agencies in Colorado? How the EPSO budget is established, what TABOR means and what does it mean to our budget, how salaries and benefits are established. Did you know how many people EPSO can and does employ? And did you know the different constitutional requirements of the sheriff? And I ask that because these are everybody in the organization, civilian or non-sworn personnel, all the way up to bureau chiefs. I wanna make sure everybody knows that.
On the last bullet, the difference between CSPD and sheriffs. I remember when I was with Division of Wildlife, our regional officers are public safety officers as well. But there are some differences between the county sheriff and the city police department. Is there not?
There is some, but not enough.
Not enough to be,
Not enough
okay.
to be concerned with.
Okay.
One of the things that, I've given deputy sheriff commissions to every single cop in every single jurisdiction in El Paso County. So that way those are erased, right? El Paso County is the most populous county in Colorado, 825,000 as of the last census. We are the largest sheriff's office with over 800 employees and nearly 500 volunteers. We run the largest single jail in Colorado with an 834 bed capacity we talked about earlier. We're the fourth largest law enforcement agency in Colorado behind Denver PD, Aurora PD, and CSPD with 542 sworn.
CSPD has 542?
No, we do.
We do.
Yeah.
We do. CSPD has 760 or so.
Okay.
Here's our budget, what our budget has done since I took office. 66 million was the combined budget. You see where we break out the PST, we add in the general fund. Our budget in 22 is $88.819 million.
And you said 80% of that is personnel, or
Yeah,
60,
about
80%?
About 82%
Okay,
is
all
personnel.
right, okay.
These are just some of the constitutional requirements. We went over all of these in the slides previously. This just talks about what most people don't realize what preserved peace is. They wonder, where does the sheriff's job pop in, and all these stupid constitutional requirements. Oh, are you a constitutional sheriff?
Right.
Give me a break. So then I ask them. They want us to communicate better. I ask them, have you read the KRW assessment from 2016? Do they know what KRW said we do right? What do we do wrong? What do we need to fix, right?
Where can we find that?
It's
on the website.
EPCsheriffsoffice.com. It is on there. Every one of these references we'll talk about is on there.
Good.
The strategic plans, there's two of them. I did 15 to 18 and 19 to 22. The previous one was a 5-year strategic plan. That's typical for people to do, as a 5-year. Problem is, elected officials are elected in 4-year blocks. Makes no sense for me to write beyond my term, right? My term ends the end of this year. Whoever the sheriff is next year is going to be responsible for writing a strategic plan. They're not going to want to do their job based on my strategic plan.
Forgive my ignorance on this. Are there term limits?
Yes.
For the sheriff? How many
So
consecutive?
it was 3 until I took office. I worked with the county commissioners to change that, put it on the ballot, and to reduce it to 2 terms. I think 2 terms is sufficient for a sheriff to work. I think after 3 years or 3 terms, you tend to start not paying as much attention to the overall function. So 2 terms.
And is that consecutive terms or just 2 terms total?
2 consecutive terms. I could sit out and come back, even though there's a better chance that an iceberg would survive in hell. Okay, I gotta crank through this. We have a meeting at 11. I would talk about ongoing variance reports by division. Every year, division commanders are responsible for submitting variance reports to that strategic plan. Where have you accomplished those goals? And if not, what are you doing to get there, right?
Are you guys participating in the current strategic plan building for the county?
Yes.
You guys are part of that, because that was one of their things, was you set the goal, what are we doing and how are we doing?
Right. All of the variance reports are on there.
Good.
We have annual reports that have, for every year, we put together an annual report. What did we accomplish this year? And especially I tell people to read 2020. What did we do during the pandemic? You would be shocked when you read that 2020 annual report at what we did in a lockdown, when we're trying to drive our budget down, and the things that we accomplished with ARPA funds or CARE funds and things along those lines. Have they read the annual staff workshop recaps? Do they know what their staff and their leadership is working on all year long to try and accomplish the goals and stuff that we want? Do they read weekly staff minutes that we print out? We put out minutes from our weekly staff meetings where we spend 3 and 4, 5, 6 hours every Wednesday working on our plans. Do people read those? And do they read our weekly informer, gives, and most people do when you get down to that level. Salary comparisons, this will shock you. 2015 is that column on the left, where people started. If you look at that, can you guys online see that, all this stuff? Okay.
Yeah.
This is the salary levels that people had. They started at $42,000. You guys gonna go to that meeting?
I'm gonna jump on it.
Okay.
It's for the Falcon substation.
Yeah. And you'll see that here in a minute. This was what a deputy started in 2015 at
Thank you, John.
42,900.
Email that to me.
Today they start at 59,000. That's an increase of 38%
Wow.
over 7 years. If they were a senior deputy, we eliminated the rank this year, but if they were a senior deputy in 2015 at 64,000, today they're making 84,000. It's a 31% increase in salary. Imagine if they started in 2015 and they're a deputy 1 today, they doubled their salary in a matter of 7 years. Sergeants are 27% more. Lieutenants, commanders. And there's a reason for this. Financially, I could have given everybody the same 30%, 31, 32% increase. But what it does is it shows that, in my mind, there's one undersheriff, there's 3 bureau chiefs, there's 7 commanders, and there's 21 lieutenants. I could have bumped them all up for a reasonable amount of money, right, every year. But I didn't, because I wanted the employees to see that I put more focus on getting people hired, getting them retained by giving them decent pay raises, and a 30% increase over a 7-year period of time versus giving 30% to the staff gives them the impact that I was trying to achieve.
Awesome.
Salary comparisons locally. You remember one of my goals in the very beginning was to get us as close to PD as possible. You see the EPSO pay in that left column. You see the CSPD pay in the middle. The right is the annual difference in salaries. We now start $858 a year higher than CSPD does, or lower than CSPD does. That's insignificant over a year.
Right.
We're working on that. Deputy 1s are still about $7,000 a year less. It's about an 8% difference. We're working on how to accomplish that. That's some of the reason that we use some of the PST funds to do that, but we're getting closer. What you don't want to see is what happens at the bureau chief level. Their commanders are 25 grand a year. Their lieutenants are 20 grand a year. That's a significant impact. And it, you know, what it does is we hope that we pay them enough money on the front end that they stick around for the. The next thing we did is we have a lateral hiring incentive in place. This is our retention and recruitment. If you get hired now, and you start our academy at $59,238. As soon as you leave the academy without any experience, you'd go to $65,800. If you have the experience necessary to make it in there, you automatically go to that $71,700.
So we still a lot of deputies or personnel from DOC.
So
yeah.
Somebody can come in here, go through 11 weeks of the academy, and come out of that academy and jump to $71,000. Significant amount of money.
Considering what the federal system is paying from
Oh yeah. And then it just shows the different levels from there. If they recruit a new sworn deputy, why is this doing that? $500 is paid to the recruiting employee at the pay cycle following the recruit's graduation. You get somebody interested, we'll give you $500 as soon as they graduate an academy. And when they're done, we give them another, after the end of a year, we'll give them another $500. So there's a retention piece in that. This is the timeline. You don't need to pay any attention to this. We had some arguments that we should recruit and train directly to patrol. I provided for them a breakdown of why that isn't advantageous at all. by showing the timeline to do lateral entry, and it takes 22 weeks to train them. And right now we're ahead of where we would have been if we'd have tried that. This talks about the graduation of personnel that we had. We graduated 34, turned out 33 on the 13th. Those numbers are holding.
How long is the post academy? Oh, you're getting ready.
22 weeks.
Okay.
This is why I didn't want to do that. I think it would alienate current jail deputies, detention deputies. The timeline's longer than hiring and training non-certs. It doesn't solve the problem. It removes hope that those in the jail that want to go to the law enforcement bureau would go. And it forces currently certified EPSO personnel to test for the new lateral entry program, which I think is stupid. And I tell them to stop talking about it.
He didn't say it like that.
Not really. Staff workshop, 3 things the staff believes we're doing well: competitive pay and benefits, leveraging technology, proactive community engagement. That's what those 80 people in there thought we were doing well. The things that we need to improve on: communication throughout the agency, hiring and retaining new employees, promotion and transfers. So what I did is I put together this piece in our spring workshop, and I said, if you believe in us, I did a survey, Survey Monkey, and I said, if you believe communication is your number one, I want you to rank that as number 1, number 2, number 3. We put it out, and there were, I think, over 96 people that took the survey. And it broke out almost exactly 33% put one of them as number 1. And so I said, here's how we're going to solve it. When we come back in the fall, if you wrote this communication as number 1, you're in this group. If you wrote hiring and retaining, you're in this group. If you wrote promotions and transfers, you're in this group. And you're going to come back in October and you're going to present how we're going to fix it. It's not my ideas. This is your ideas. This is what you think is the biggest deal. Then we had a bureau chief and a couple of commanders and a few lieutenants and some sergeants in each group. And they met routinely and worked out ideas and solutions to the problem. And when they came back in October, they all had to put a team of people up on the stage and present, this is what we see as a problem and this is how we're going to resolve it. And that's what's generated some of these pieces.
All right, so the follow-up is how many of their suggestions and stuff have you implemented?
All of them.
All of them.
That's great.
All of them.
That's a number one, having been in the military and a dispersed environment. That is one of the hardest things to do when you're running a 24-hour shift over the geographic expansion area that you have, is to maintain effective and thorough communications about what's going on. Because the different shifts, you're 24/7, you work day shift, he's sitting in the ivory tower, he doesn't give a crap about me out here in Falcon somewhere,
Right.
Kind of attitude to things. And they get that misinformation with the social media now, crap starts flowing through that process. And it's so hard to overcome that. But once you get ahead of it and you develop that trust, you can stay ahead of it a lot easier than you can overcome it.
Right.
And,
well, and so that's why I did that. This
kudos
whole
to
process.
you. That's great.
Stand in front of every single person and show them what we're doing. Tell them why we're interested. Tell them the things that we're going to do to implement it. Right. If you wanted to know where we're going, read the roadmap in the strategic plans. That tells you where we're going. If you want to know how we're doing on the trip, read those annual reports. Read the variance reports. You'll know how we're doing. If you want to know anything else, here's these other options that'll tell you. And by the way, I'll do a video, and I've got a sample video. Okay. All right, I got to rock. We're developing a Falcon substation, and you'll see why. Here's my priorities. Every year I establish a group of priorities for staff. And these are the things they've got to work on throughout the year to try and accomplish where I want to be at the end of my term. Peer support program and employee wellness. If we don't take care of our people, we won't have them, right? It's a tough gig. CALIA accreditation, Commission for the Accreditation of Law Enforcement Agencies. I want that CALIA accreditation to match our other accreditations. Maintain the ADP at the jail at 1,100 or below. It is possible. We're at about 1,250. We're doing some other things that are gonna drive that. That's to make it safe and need less personnel, right? Don't have to start having conversations about building a bigger jail. Maintain leadership training and career development.
Tents in the parking lot.
Right. Establish a permanent Falcon substation. That's important to me. The last piece that we're gonna talk about is what's left on my term goals, if this will pop up. This is very picturesque, right? Nice little sunset. The sunset of my term. Come on, what are you doing here?
It's sunsetting.
It's a slow sunset, Bill.
Yes.
You're not done
Doesn't
yet.
wanna go down.
The horse isn't saddled, yeah.
Yeah, well, that horse is settled. All right, we'll let him in, and then I'm going to stop presenting. Stop presenting.
Thanks for letting me back in. I got off there for some reason.
I thought you'd had enough.
No, not me.
So that is everything that I've got. Anybody else got? Whoop, wrong button. I think. Well, I'm off of that. You can still hear me, right, Stan?
Yeah, sure can. All
Okay.
good.
Okay. Anything else?
Where on your website is that KSW report?
KRW.
KRW
Or
is
KRW?
Kind of down.
If you want to send me the link, Janet, I'll send it to the
Yeah.
whole
Because
group.
I'm on the website and I see the strategic plans, annual report, that I was able to find all that. It's just that one.
I think it's in a drop down box.
We'll find it. Make sure you got
Okay.
it.
Well, Sheriff,
Bill, this is Commissioner Stan.
Yes.
Yeah, thanks. First of all, appreciate the presentations and the charts. Every time I learn a little something new about the sheriff's office, and those were great. I appreciated your very last visual, the sunset thing.
Yeah.
I know you've been looking forward to, a little bit less of the stress that's connected with the sheriff's office and so forth, and moving to other things. But I do want to ask, because I think it's so important, and this is about expressing appreciation for your service to the community, but how long have you been in law enforcement?
I started in 1978 as a volunteer at the sheriff's office. I went on patrol in 1979. So, I don't know, 44 years. Yeah, and this is the end of my second term as a sheriff.
Yeah, thank you.
Couple
So
of
I
days.
just think it's
I'll be
important
65 on the 2nd of July.
I think it's important to express our appreciation to Bill Elder for his service. I mean, everybody in the sheriff's office, thank you to all of them. But, we're getting at that point where we need to just be specific and thank Bill for his service. Because of the many years of dedication to public safety, some of the great things that he has done in his 2 terms here to make the sheriff's office a better place to work and to help them be more successful. Those are really great things. So I'll just say thanks to Bill, to Sheriff Elder for the great work that he's done. And I hope that whatever you do after you're a sheriff, that it is exactly what you were hoping for.
Thanks, man, I appreciate that. Well, one of the things that I do, that we do for our employees is, I developed a coin of excellence when I first took office. And the coin of excellence is, if I catch people doing things right, we meet them, we bring them in, we usually give them a certificate, and we coin them. And so, it basically just says El Paso County Sheriff's Office with our badge on the front. On the back, it says for excellence in service to citizens of El Paso County. It's got the logo for the county on it and a flag. It has the Roman numerals 28, which is I'm the 28th sheriff, and it has Sheriff Bill Elder and the 2015 to 2023. And on the outside is inscribed, the pain I feel today will be the strength I feel tomorrow. That was Micah Flick's Bible verse. And so what I did, because this is my last COG meeting, I brought a dozen of these. And so I was hoping to have everybody here, but I will leave these with Rhino.
Thank you.
And I will present to you guys. Thank you for what you've done for El Paso County, and the things that you've done to help us move forward, and the continued push towards betterment of public safety in our community.
Well,
I can't find that thing either. It was listed on there before. I don't know where it ended up. Okay, the report.
thank you, sir.